How you doing, Ace?
Very well. How about yourself, my friend?
Good. Where are you at right now?
I'm right in the smack center of Hollywood.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I moved there in '88 from New Jersey to be in Guns and to try to chase the Guns N' Roses dream, and just what a magical place. Still, just rock is just magical there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely an interesting place out here.
Yeah. What were you into in high school?
What was
What
I
band?
into in high
Yeah. What
school?
bands were you into in high school? What bands were you listening to in high
Like
school?
a lot of punk rock. So, I mean, I'm class of '01. So you got to take into consideration in the late '90s, for me, like middle school and into early high school, a lot of the stuff that was going on was like alternative and sort of the second wave of punk rock, like Green Day and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I was into a lot of that. And my first real favorite band, I was probably 12, was Metallica. So
Okay.
that kind of spread out for me with like turning me on to the Misfits and all kinds of stuff, Discharge, Faith No More, all kinds of random stuff. Before the internet, I'd
Yeah.
look at see what T-shirts the bands I liked were wearing and go
Totally.
and get the cassette of whatever that band was, and uh, and then that kind of turned me on to what was punk rock, mostly.
Right.
And when I got into high school, it was very clique oriented. There were the metal kids and the goth kids and the raver kids and the punk kids.
Yeah.
And so I sort of floated between all of them because I was like, well, I like Sisters of Mercy, which was a band Kirk
Yeah.
Hammett turned me on to, but I also like Iron Maiden, but I also like the Eagles, but I also like Depeche Mode, but I also like Dead Kennedys. So I was sort
Right.
of
Right.
an outcast amongst the
hmm
outcasts.
I love that
And
you. Yeah. I love that you get that because where I grew up in New Jersey, very close to the Old Bridge Metal Militia, and
yeah,
people always go, "You." I couldn't like Metallica because you had to pick a team like
yeah,
Rat, Poison, Motley Crue, or you would get killed. You were a poser. You stuck to your team. It was like Crips and Bloods, where
yeah.
really where you had to stick to. I love that you said there were lines, and I guess some classes didn't have it, some did. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was. Look, I was definitely not the cool kid. I was anything but. Actually, one of my stories I enjoy telling is there was a skinhead named Billy, and when I say skinhead, I don't mean like a Nazi skinhead. I just mean he was just like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sort of faction of punk rock,
Yeah.
whatever, with the suspenders and the shaved head, right? And this guy was a bully. He'd throw an apple at me every day and call me stuff you can't say on
Right. You can say
public
whatever you want.
places.
Yeah, but yeah, yeah.
And his favorite band was a band called the US Bombs. I remember he had a beanie with a patch that he made at home that said US Bombs. And I saw him after I graduated high school at a US Bombs show. And then years later, I'd be in that band,
That's
in my
crazy,
20s.
man. Wow.
So I enjoy, and there's a whole backstory to that too, as well. But I do enjoy telling people, oh, yeah, tell them, the guitar player for the US Bombs says,
Oh, totally.
whatever.
Yeah.
But I still very diverse music. I mean, someone asked me the other day what I'm listening to. I'm listening to a lot of neoclassical dark wave, which is just
Right.
sort of like doomy operatic music. But I go through phases. What's on my turntable right now actually is Green Day Dookie. Uh, and a buddy of mine from high school, a guy I've known since I was a teenager named Kevin, is now in Green Day. So it's weird
Oh,
how
wow.
a lot of things, and we used to book our band's shows together, and whatnot. So it's weird how stuff's kind of come around and whatnot. But I I also, the genre of music that I'm now known for, between Pussycat when my 10 years with Tammy, and then now a couple years in with L.A. Guns. Uh, I was aware of it, but I missed it by about 2 or 3 years, because you got to think, circa 94, 95, when I was getting into music, that stuff was sort of no longer in vogue. And
Right.
so I was aware of it. I remember seeing the videos. And of course, I had like a Motley Crue cassette, and
Yeah.
I had Appetite for Destruction, because in the suburbs, you were just issued that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't really get too deep into it. And I remember finding with some of my metal friends, finding some weird sort of keeping the peace, where I was like, okay, well, Guns N' Roses did a punk rock tribute album,
Right.
Spaghetti Incident, which is basically all punk, Dead Boys and whatnot, Misfits.
Oh, yeah.
And then Metallica did the same thing. So it was sort of like some of the punk bands that I liked from my metal friends were allowed. Like Black Flag was allowed because Henry Rollins. Misfits were allowed because of Danzig. You know what I mean? It's like this
Dude,
weird.
I totally get it. Like I just had Scotty Hill on, and we were talking about that Skid Row got a pass where they could play with Pantera or they could play with Bon Jovi. Certain bands got a hall pass, I call it, where they could kind of float. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I also love that. I totally get what you're saying about Garage Days Revisited. I couldn't join Team Metallica, but actually a lot of the stuff you're talking about is a snapshot of up here in the Bay Area. I've gone by that house, the Metallica house, just in reverence.
Yeah.
And I studied the pictures of, if you look on the newspaper, it's the day Rock Hudson died. You could see the fast food containers Cliff has from around the corner of the house. And you just see their posters and stuff. You'd be like, that's what I got to discover some of that, whether it's a Motley Crue doing that or Metallica. If you really go in, it gets you down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah. And it really, at the end of the day, I mean, it's all basically just rock and roll. I mean, if you talk to Dave Gahan, he'll be like, oh, well, I was really inspired by Dave Vanian from The Damned. And you talk to Iron Maiden and they're like, oh, well, we were inspired by these bands. And it all really just circles back to like late 60s, 70s, bass player, drummer, guitar player, singer. It's really just rock and roll. So you get anything from, Foo Fighters to, I'm trying to think as avant-garde here as possible, but to Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah.
And it's still rock based. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's what I appreciate. I'm just a fan of music and a guitar player. So for me, I'm like, is there a guitar player? Yes. Okay, great. I'm interested. Whether it's, Danny and the Juniors or Oingo Boingo.
Yeah.
So
you strike me as someone I love, guys. I call it being into shit. Look at your horror. You're into shit, and that I'm sure that all the horror movies, everything bleeds into your playing. It's a whole thread that comes into what you're about. I'm sure.
Yeah, that's one of my sort of. I mean, you can see I've got these one sheets behind me. These are original theatrical British quad sheets, and I collect. I collect that kind of stuff, movie posters, if you will, one sheets from the releases and stuff. I got stuff going back to the 40s. And I'm even wearing, I think that's Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein's monster on my shirt. But anyhow, I won't bore you with that.
No.
But that was the kind of thing my father turned me on to when I was a little boy. And then talking about music and Metallica and the Misfits and Danzig, stuff like that, I remember being 11 or 12 and getting this coffee table book when Metallica was everywhere, and they turned me on to the Misfits, and it was my first real obsession. I mean, from 13 to 16, every year for Halloween, I had my devil lock, like the Misfits hairstyle. And I remember going to my dad and being like, "This band sings about these movies," and he was like, "Yeah, whatever." But to me, it was this coming together. I was like, they've got the aesthetic and the whatever you want to call it of Kiss, which I wasn't really into. But then the horror movie element, but then there's this sort of punk rock danger and, everything a prepubescent boy would be interested in. Right.
Yeah.
And that was one of my favorite things. Some of my favorite memories growing up is, going to see the reunion of that band and getting really interested in that. And then applying it to horror movies. And then now applying it to me as an adult. I mean, there's a lot of things I do, but one of them is, like I said, collect these one sheet, these posters, inserts, quads, day bills, whatever, et cetera, et cetera.
It obviously bleeds into music, and there's some thread where I remember I worked at Lucky Jeans and I had to deliver Kirk Hammett some jeans to his house. He hated parking. So it was right up the hill. And I walk in, there's like a full Wolfman there. There was like Wolfman and that stuff. Like, I mean, it's the same. And then you go to the airport and he has his collection. And I really believe, there's certain things that, like, when I started hanging out with rap guys, why do they all like craft work? There's threads that tie things together. You know what I mean? Like Dr. Dre likes craft work, and a lot of, do you get what I'm saying? There are these threads, these outside threads of the direct influence of what you're doing that makes something
absolutely
happen.
There is a integral line between horror movies, etc., subculture, and heavy metal, hard rock, some punk rock, etc., that are pretty intrinsic when you really look at it. I mean, you get death metal genre bands, Obituary, Carcass, whatever, basically singing lyrically what is a horror movie.
Yeah.
Same thing with Metallica. I mean, like Call of Cthulhu and stuff like that. You're going to like back to like horror in writing, but still, it's very, you know. And you look at these album covers, whether it's Testament or even the Misfits. Like Walk Among Us has the cover of Angry Red, the artwork from Angry Red Planet on it. And you're looking at the artwork, and one of the other things I love doing is I collect vinyl. And you know, you stare at the artwork, and you're like, this, you know, this could be a horror movie poster.
Yeah, totally, totally. Something to look at. I love that. And it's funny that now from horror movies back to punk rock, I was talking to Luke from Double Cobra the other day, and he was saying he went to see, I forget who he went to see at the country club, but Faster Pussycat opened up way early on, when they very punk rock. And he's like, it was sounded like Aerosmith riffs being played by like GBH or a punk rock band. You know what I mean? At that time. And, you know, we all get the Pussycat we've heard now, but there's this myth of that time of, I guess that's what they truly were. And
and it's interesting you say that. I've been at Tammy's more this year during lockdown than I have in the 9.5, 10 years I was an active member of the band.
Right.
Between helping him with some projects and recording and writing and a bunch of other stuff. And just like a lot of the LA Guns stuff and Faster Pussycat and a couple other bands, Guns N' Roses, obviously, but that's no affiliation there. These guys, when you go back to their roots in, 1984, 83, before, there was no, prior to Motley and Rat or whatever else, I'm guessing here because I wasn't there, but a lot of it was, you had the 70s stuff like the Nuge and Aerosmith and Cooper, especially talking about horror movies and stuff. You get Black Sabbath and Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff. And then what was going on in LA was all punk rock. And interestingly enough, a guy I used to live with 10 years ago when I originally joined Pussycat, he used to be a photographer, and he had some photos from the second Faster Pussycat show ever. And Taney was on stage wearing a Misfit shirt, and he had charged hair. He looked like Colin from GBH. It's fun, interesting you should mention that. And I showed Taney these photos. He hadn't seen him in 20, 30 years, whatever it was. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we were such punks," And I'm like, "Yeah." And if you listen to that first Faster Pussycat album, especially, if you had given them all mohawks, or if they looked like a punk band, and same thing with Jet Boy. I mean, Mickey had a mohawk too. If you gave him short hair, it would have easily been considered what I think would have been called punk rock. But because of the time frame, late 80s, glam, whatever you want to call it, sleaze rock, whatever, I think it just obviously went to that. So everyone grew their hair out. It's like when the Joneses grew their hair out, and TSOL grew their hair out, and changed sound a little bit. I'm sure a myriad of other bands,
Yeah.
And that's where you get all that stuff, early influences. Even LA Guns, I think circa 91 did an EP. I can't remember what it's called, early 90s. An EP, and it was like Generation X and The Damned. It was a bunch of punk
Wasn't
stuff.
their first drummer like Nicky Beat from the Germs or something? When I was doing my deep dive on LA Guns as a kid, he was like the Weirdos or something like for real.
Nicky Beat, he was in the Weirdos, and I believe he was on one single from the Germs. Gun Club, maybe he was in a bunch of those LA bands, and Mau Mau's, which is where Paul Mars Black, who supersedes Phil Lewis. With the band came from. And so there's this sort of transgression from LA punk bands and the scene to what was going on here, let's say circa 84 and on, that heavily bled into LA Guns and Faster Pussycat with band members and shows they were playing. I mean, hell, some of the shows that both those bands played were like opening for Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls.
What's weird is that if you think about it, the rockers, like not myself, but you truly were influenced. And I'm friends with Brent and Tammy, influenced by Specimen, all those things. And then when you look back, the skaters who you thought invented punk rock and DRI and GBH were listening to the Nuge and Aerosmith along with that stuff.
Oh, fully.
So that's pretty of that late 70s, early 80s time. So they were
a lot of the stuff I'm gathering is absolutely that. I'm in the middle of reading this book. I'm literally halfway through it. It's called it's about Bad Religion.
Okay.
And Do What You Want. That's what it's called. And I'm reading the same thing with them, and the same conversations I've had with Ricky Rackman, who happens name drop, but happens to be one of my closest friends in the world. And same thing with him. His first, I think one of his first concerts was seeing the Germs. And so you read these guys and like, well, up to 79, And I've been going down this rabbit hole with like stuff from Ian MacKaye and Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
And they're like, up to 79, I was really into the Nuge and really into Aerosmith. And then one day we all woke up, shaved our head, and started a punk band, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so there was some weird transition, I think. And again, I'm guessing because a lot of it's what I'm reading or watching interviews with and stuff in my downtime here. I obviously wasn't there because I wasn't alive yet, but it seems to be that was sort of the common case for a lot of these guys were listening to that and maybe playing guitar or learning these, whether it was, Toys in the Attic or, some Alice Cooper something or whatever it might be, UFO. And then when the punk thing happened, they sort of like, well, we listened to this, and learn from that, but now we're going to pull from this new thing going on. And that's where a lot of the stuff, I think even the first LA Guns record has some sort of punk Motorhead elements to it that I appreciate. And the same thing with the early Motorhead stuff. I mean, I think if you had given them short hair, it's pretty comparable to GBH or Anti-Nowhere League.
Right. I wouldn't know enough.
So, and then those bands influenced Metallica. I mean, Metallica covered all those bands. So it's interesting how they sort of all even mesh together. And I'm rambling, which
no. That's just what we. I mean, going on about the music, because then it leads. We're gonna get to the stream soon, but not living in LA at the time, moving in '88, there were 3 snapshots and 3 colors of LA to me as a kid. Going to high school, and it was the first LA Guns album, the Pussycat album, and Guns, and they were 3 different snapshots, but with this sound of this Hollywood groove, this whole thing that just sounded like Los Angeles and bikers and the city. And
what I guess now is sort of subgenre or whatever is sort of identified as like sleaze rock.
It seems like such a terrible title for such, to me, shit that I love. I mean, it's because to me it's up there with Springsteen singing about New Jersey or Billy Joe Armstrong singing about Oakland. Painting his pic. Like you said, I love that you love Dookie, because people will scoff at it sometimes, but I'm like, that's a snapshot of this city and Bart.
That record, I got beat up in 5th grade for having a Green Day t-shirt when they were like new whatever. No, they weren't even a new band. That they had been, I think they started in like 87 or 88. But I love that whole, actually just watched a documentary on Bay Area punk starting in the late 70s, going back to Mabuhay Gardens and all this stuff, the Mab, and talking about, the Screamers and the Avengers and Dead Kennedys, obviously, and all these bands that I loved as a kid, and that scene, and I always really admired that. And what the first tour I ever did as a teenager, I was still in high school, I played a sold out show at 924 Gilman.
Oh wow!
And I'm getting goosebumps, but I was 17. I was a teenager. I played this show to 500 or 600 people, opening for a band called the Nerve Agents that was big up there at the time, and a band called the Frisk, which was a member of AFI who had just was blowing up at the time. And I was, enthralled to be in this city 700 miles away or whatever from my home and playing a sold out show. That was, 20 years ago now for me. And I just remember being like, I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing for forever.
I feel crazy.
I love that scene at Rancid, Dead Kennedys, Green Day. Again, I'm ranting, but Bay Area had a really strong scene. They may still do, I don't know anymore, but as far as punk rock from the, late 70s, especially in the 90s, Spaz and Blatz and all kinds of stuff, really deep cut bands. And I was into that. I was listening to that, but then also listening to, Carcass and then I'd put on Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, because until I got into high school, I didn't understand what genres were. I didn't know that you could only listen to, and I liked Joni Mitchell because my mom shoved that down my throat, and I liked a lot of doo-wop, Fats Domino and Danny and the Juniors and all that nonsense from the 50s and early 60s that bled into garage rock, the Nuggets era stuff, that's sort of proto-punk, and then you go from there. I get my coffee at Phil's, which there's a Phil's coffee right by Gilman now. Yeah. I get so angry when I drive with someone and I try to point at that building that still does have that spirit. You still see
kids with GBH crew patches, just those colors. It's just so vibrant. And they're sitting out in the sidewalk. And once in a while, in the middle of the day, I think I went there once last year to see a friend's band, but there's still that vibrancy. I don't know if it's as vibrant, but it's something still going on there. And people don't get that music changed at that little brick building. I mean, it's different than going by the whiskey or something. This club is in the middle of an industrial section. It's starting to get gentrified, but
Yeah.
it all changed there.
I mean, I feel like 924 Gilman is the equivalent of what was New York's CBGB,
Easily.
especially if you're discussing like the punk rock scene and going from well, Gilman started in the mid 80s or whatever it was as of that project, but regardless. And I got to play CBGBs when I was like 22 on a sold out tour with the Dead Kennedys. I was a kid.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. Actually, I wear this silver skull ring I've had since that show. I actually bought this at a head shop the day I played CBGBs, and it's the only piece of jewelry I never take off. And that's a big memory for me too. Playing CBGBs, a sold out show with the Dead Kennedys. I think I broke every string on every guitar I brought with me, and I jumped into the crowd at the end of the show. It was great, and those are my favorite memories. Going back as a kid and coming up and being touring bands. You haven't showered in 12 days and whatnot. But
well, I love how much it means to you. See you point in and get chilled. This stuff all just means so much. It's so huge. And I mean, now let's get to the LA Guns stream.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I mean, for starters, playing with Tracy's got to be pretty huge. To me, he playing guitar, he reminds me of a dirty Randy Rhoads, like the same level of playing to me. He has that Randy Rhoads thing, and to play off him's got to be pretty huge. And you yourself, I mean, that's a pretty exciting duo of you guys, man.
Yeah, I mean, look,
that's not slouching. That's a level. That's punk rock and Randy Rhoads in the same sentence.
For sure. I mean, his influences, I think he wears on his sleeve, whether it's Shanker or Randy Rhoads and a couple other guys. And Tracy's, I mean, not only is he a bandmate and technically like my boss, but he's a really good friend and he's a good man. And on top of that, that dude is a freaking legend.
Oh yeah.
So you're right, to get to play, on stage with the guy here for a few years has been really great. I've learned a lot from him. As a player and just as a human being.
That's cool.
And I really I love those guys. That's the cool thing. And not every band has this vibe, but it's really great to be in a band where I feel like it's like my family.
Right.
Where everyone's like, how's your kid? How's your wife? How's your grandma? How's the puppy? And you're excited to see each other. One of the last gigs we did, and because of COVID, obviously, was around the Christmas holiday, which has now been almost a year, sad to say. And we've done a couple other things since, but one of the last things. And we all, we had like a cake and we're hugging and swapping gifts. And so there's aside from the fact that he's Tracy Guns, there's this other element of like, oh my God, bro, I love you to death. Come over to the house. I'm going to, make you lunch or whatever the hell it is, and that like, I keep doing this whole thing, but that means the world to me.
No. Well, I could see where on a Frusciante joining the Chili Peppers level, I didn't know you, but someone that is like you and passionate rather than some guy that's just not into stuff that can play, but your amount of soul I can feel coming off you. I'm sure it's really cool that he got you, I mean, that it's a two-way streak. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I may be talking out of turn, but they called me several times at several points in history, and it just didn't line up. And let's just say all the things lined up at that time.
Yeah.
And they had needed a guy. And I said, well, I'm just coming off of a tour and I'd like to stay on the road for personal reasons. And why don't I just come out? And they had like a 12-day run. And I said, we'll see how it goes. And, I said, I don't have any expectations of you guys. And hopefully, it was like a trial kind of run. And my whole thing was, I said, look, I understand what the job entails, but I don't really want to audition. If you want me to learn a whole set,
right.
To come down and say, maybe. Yeah. I mean, you guys have already called me.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Otherwise, let's not kid ourselves. And to be honest, I mean, the bulk of the work is, or the bulk of the heavy lifting, if you will, is Tracy. So, and I know my wheelhouse. I'm not Ingve. I'm not a shredder. I've never had a guitar lesson in my life. I don't know what I'm doing, and it shows sometimes.
Right.
But as far as playing my fulfilling my role in this band, in the same with other gigs, whether it's the lead guy in Faster Pussycat, which again isn't very technical, or what have you, I knew that I could nail it. So I came in and we jammed one time, and he was like, "All right, cancel the rest of the rehearsals. You're good." And that was it. And off we went a couple days later, and I had a blast. And I think they had a blast, and I think all parties were relieved that there was no tension from anybody. I think that there had been some previous things like that, and I was just happy to be around a bunch of guys where it was very professional, and we're all doing the Woe Bundy before the show, and it was a very communal group effort, and a great crew, great sound guy, great drum tech, great guitar tech, all these elements, and my tour manager I love to death, little Irish kid, and
I mean, well, that's like you say, like whether it's a job that you're going to, or a trying out for. We've tried out band members our whole lives. In 30 seconds to a minute but by the time someone tunes whether it might work or not.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's really like I really like that you're like, I'm in it, because you just know. You know what I mean?
Any guitar player could do what I do. You know what I mean? The thing is there's other elements and other aspects. Can we get along with this person? What do they look like? What's their professional background? Are they an a-hole, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been really cool to be a small sliver of what is this band's legacy. And, now we're doing the stream, the first time cover to cover of Cocked and Loaded is I think a big deal.
I think that's they're really their snap. I think Guns really had their first album was their snapshot. I feel like Cocked and Loaded is LA Guns' snapshot of LA Guns, even like the opening, the letting it go to slapping the fit. Like it's the small bit into the big song. It's such a story, and just plays like such an album, man, from the artwork to everything. That's the album, man.
Absolutely. I love that cover art, and
it is special, right? That cover, there's something about it that was just Hollywood, and just like
I like the same thing with Appetite. I like stuff that's like would also transpose as a tattoo, or a sticker or something like that. I always like something that's you can sort of make as like a logo, or whatever, etc. And
there's some humanity behind it too. It feels like it wasn't all photoshopped out. It feels like
Same thing with the first album cover too. It's like tattoo flash artwork, something cool to look at. You look in, there's all the little details and stuff, and so it's an honor for me to be a part of that, with this, in regards to the LA Guns legacy, and I'm excited for the show. I know everybody else is. And
November 28th,
November 28th,
Fremont Country Club in Vegas. You're going to be streaming it. People can, I'll put the link in the chat where they can buy tickets. And Eddie Trunk's hosting it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be on site or if it's a digital thing. I frankly don't know.
Yeah,
I do love Ed. We go back with all the appearing on a show and the cruises and all that stuff, and throwing back some whiskey here and there. And so anytime I get to see him, whether it's something like this or in person, is always a blast. And he's such a knowledgeable guy.
It just seems like there's a lot going on with this night. You're playing, it seems like a party, and that's what you can sit at your home and you have a party with LA Guns. It's not just, you got a guitar giveaways, playing this album. It seems really cool. Like it's going to be a special night, November 28th.
It definitely should be.
People need it, man.
The goal is to set it up like that. And there'll be some VIP streaming type meet and greet, video type things, I believe, and all kinds of other packages and stuff to make it interactive, just from, the basic ticket to the show to this that comes with a shirt or a poster or whatever else. And I think that's really cool, especially under the circumstances that we're all going through, globally here, where a lot of us, across the globe aren't able to go to concerts anymore. And so at least we can do these kind of streaming things, and you could go, hey, Britt, I'm in Sheboygan and I'm going to watch the same thing. We're at the show together.
It's a collective energy, and hopefully there is a chat. We don't know where people can collect their energy, and it is a feeling like you're at a show. The closest thing. I actually think I get more up the streams than I do. I've seen some of the drive-in shows, and I get more up the stream because it's everybody and all your friends, and it feels like you're somewhere, and there's an electricity, because there's also nervousness for you, you gotta nail it, man. It's no do-overs. You're being recorded. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
You're
that is
projecting. You have to
a little
project
nerve-wracking.
energy. You know what I mean? In a crazy way. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
Letterman or
and
something.
it's funny you should point that out because there's a difference between just playing a normal gig where you got 3, 5, 1,200 people in front of you, whatever it is.
Volume
And
perception makes them think you're better than you are.
yes, and you're feeding off the crowd and they're feeding off the show, and it's this circular whole thing. And playing to, because we did a streaming event earlier this year, playing to just a few people in a room and camera crew, etc. It's not the same thing, and so you're put under a microscope a little bit more, and it is a little intimidating, especially, at least for me personally, where I'm performing, like a lot of the bands I've been in, not all, but a lot, where I'm performing someone else's music. This
Right.
isn't, I could get up and play some song I wrote 12 years ago and be like, oh, well, this is how I played it because I know, because I wrote it and I recorded it. But
Right.
this is someone else's shoes I'm stepping into.
Yes.
So
Part of
I,
Hollywood DNA. Like it's
yeah,
like messing
hopefully.
with Star Wars or Metallica or something. There's certain things that are sacred, and that record's pretty sacred. Well, Ace, thank you for stopping by, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I'll be there on the stream, man. I can't wait to watch it. November
Very cool.
28th. And I'll put the
Yeah.
link in the chat.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.